Well, thank you so much for that. What a fun morning of worship already. As Drew said, my name is Juli Yocum. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Baby Grace, and it's always a pleasure to come and speak with you. As you see, the title of today's sermon is Growing Pains, and when I bring Kleenex with me, that probably gives you an indication of what kind of year that I've had. It has been a year of growth, and it's been a year of some pain. And so it's always a pleasure for me to get to share this journey with all of you. In the same way that humans are born with an instinct to walk, baby birds are born with an instinct to fly. And, like the newborn baby who is not yet capable of walking, a baby bird is not immediately able to fly. The baby bird's mother uses food as motivation for the bird to leave the nest. First, she drops food directly into the nest, but then eventually starts dropping it further and further away and onto a nearby branch, coaxing the baby bird to leave the nest in a quest to find food that avoids starvation. Inevitably, in the first few attempts, the baby bird, still unstable on its legs and its wings, falls to the ground. In fact, it's believed that a timid baby bird may even receive an extra nudge or even a push from its parent, encouraging them to leave that nest and learn to use their wings for the God-given ability to fly. There are times in our lives when we are like the baby bird, content to stay in the nest. And there are other times when we have to be like the parent and give that nudge to someone else to venture out and learn to use their God-given abilities to fly, figuratively speaking, of course. It's easy to get comfortable in the proverbial nest. It's safe, it's certain, but after a while, that certainty evolves into complacency, and we are not called to complacency. As we just heard, Luke 9:62 says, "No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God." I want to believe that I am fit for service in God's kingdom, and that means that I have to be willing to leave the nest and not look back. We all have to learn to find our way. We all have to grow. And when we allow ourselves to submit to complacency, we simply aren't growing. With growth comes uncertainty, but we must embrace the uncertain ground, knowing that growth is a good thing. If God says it is in His will to move along, and if He nudges our heart, then we should do so. If you look back at the lives of the prophets, from Moses to Elijah to Jonah, it is clear that their lives were often lived in the uncertainty. God nudged them to unknown places, from wilderness to mountaintops to foreign cities, but He was there with them each step along the way. God gave the prophets the words to say and the provisions they needed. The prophets had to learn and grow, and in the uncertainty, God made that happen. Have any of you ever been filled with uncertainty as God has nudged you to unknown places or situations? How many of you have had to lean on your faith as you were nudged away from your nest to learn and grow in ways that maybe you weren't prepared for? Today I want to talk with you about the 3 ways that I have witnessed these types of growing pains in the last year through Baby Grace. First, for the entire ministry. Second, through our camping program. And third, at individual levels for some of those campers. Starting with the ministry, which includes 20 locations and 5 camps. When I assumed the executive director position for Baby Grace in 2017, there was plenty of uncertainty about what that meant for me and the ministry as a whole. That journey revealed 2 needs: greater awareness of what we do and funding to make it happen. Our current model allows each program complete autonomy in how they operate. And while the directors appreciate the autonomy this model brings, it also places the burden of funding those programs on them as well. This structure presents 2 primary challenges. First, the ministry is inconsistent across our 20 locations. The amount of diapers distributed, the availability of scholarships, the ability to sponsor families to camp are examples of variances that occur due to funding inconsistencies that occur when each location is left to completely fund their own programming as a ministry of their local church. 2, Even with all volunteer staff, a camping program is expensive to run. It costs about $500 for every family that we bring to Baby Grace Camp, and several locations just don't have the funds available to sponsor someone from their chapter. So we aren't reaching as many families through the camping program as we could if we removed those financial hurdles. So after numerous interviews and significant research, I determined that our best way forward was to establish a 501c3. That is a state and federally recognized nonprofit entity called the Baby Grace Foundation. This separate entity would allow us the flexibility to raise awareness and funds on behalf of all Baby Grace programs, including all current and future locations and camps. Even though I became convinced that this was our way forward, I found myself like that mama bird, out on the branch, encouraging other Baby Grace leaders out of their nest and into a world of change that they were not prepared for. There was fear that the foundation would assume responsibility and authority over those existing programs, dictating what they do and when. The uncertainty of the foundation's influence bred fear and resistance to this change. I spent several months talking with directors to address their concerns, assuring them that the foundation was meant to raise awareness and funds so that the camps and local chapters can spend less time worrying about funding and more time doing what they do best, being God's hands and feet in the name of grace for our families, on their own schedules, in their own ways, and still with their own autonomous leadership. At our annual meeting in March, I received a unanimous vote of support to pursue this 501c3. This newly formed board of directors started meeting in May. I am blessed with 6 other people who answered the call to serve on this board and help us spread the ministry of grace in ways that I alone could not. In September, we received incorporation status, and just last weekend, we received notice from the IRS that we were officially approved as a nonprofit entity. I told you it was growing pains. This marks a significant step in our journey, and one that will lead to greater ways that Baby Grace can transform this world in the name of grace. The second area that I witnessed growing pains this last year was in Baby Grace Camp. I know in the past I haven't talked with you a lot about camp, but this church made generous donations this year that made camp possible. So I want to share this important part of our ministry with you today. Since 2012, Baby Grace Camp has provided a unique church camp experience designed specifically for Baby Grace moms and their children ages 0 to 5. I volunteered at Baby Grace Camp for the first time in 2016. And even though I had founded this ministry and had been leading it for 10 years, it wasn't until I went to camp that I literally saw the fruits of our labor. We always say that we are about planting seeds of faith and love and grace. And as we hand out diapers and sort through clothing donations, we often do so without the benefit of seeing God's rewards in the lives of those we serve. But at camp, in just 48 hours, we witnessed absolute transformation. I was so impressed after that first year that I told the camp staff, we have to do more of this. There are more Baby Grace families that need this. So with some not so gentle nudging from me, in just 3 short years, we went from 1 camp to 5, each with its own audience and focus. Eventually, the momentum of that growth was bound to catch up with us, and this year it did. We had an absolutely incredible camping season. God showed up in powerful ways at each and every camp, and we were able to touch the lives of 40 families through our various camping options this year. But behind the scenes, we didn't always let God in the picture. To support the growth, we had welcomed new leaders and volunteers. There were a lot of moving parts, and we struggled to keep it together. There was frustration, miscommunication, unmet expectations, and hurt feelings. All year long, we kept telling ourselves, this is just growing pains. And we kept chanting one of my favorite verses from James. Count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. Friends, you can ask my parents. Patience is not a virtue that I possess. And there were many moments that this year that even when I could see the fall coming, I had to step back and let it fall. Once again, I was like that mama bird, standing on the branch and watching the baby bird fall, knowing that is how he will learn to fly. In September, I called a camp staff meeting to find our way forward. While there is still much work to be done, the important thing is that we all could agree on one thing: why we do it. And that is to create a community of faith and connection where these families can feel God's love and grace. When you understand why you must leave the nest, the instinct to fly becomes even greater, and I have every reason to believe that next year's camping season will be our best yet. So now that I've shared with you the growing pains that we've experienced in our ministry and in our camping program, I want to shift focus to the third and final way that I have witnessed growing pains this last year, which is at an individual, very personal level for some very special campers. But first, I need to give you a little bit of history. I had observed that while transformation was occurring at camp, we didn't have a logical next step for those moms to continue their growth. Last spring, I came up with an idea for a moms-only retreat where we would invite former campers back without kids, and they would be exposed to leadership and personal growth opportunities that are difficult to explore when kids are in tow at our traditional camp. After several years of camping, we were starting to see leadership potential and interest in our moms, and I wanted to give them the opportunity to explore that potential. I called my friend Rosie to pitch the idea, mostly expecting to be talked out of it, maybe secretly hoping to be talked out of it. But instead, Rosie listened patiently while I rambled on about this vision, and she said, I'm in. In August of 2018, we held the first ever alumni camp, welcoming 17 former Baby Grace mom campers back for what we were sure was going to be a weekend of helping them discover their strengths and their leadership potential. But remember, the title of the sermon is Growing Pains. On Sunday of that weekend, I'm pretty sure that Rosie and I cried the entire way home, convinced that we had failed miserably. We had seen so much potential in these young women, but we quickly learned that they were not ready to see that strength in themselves. By that Sunday night, Rosie and I could not imagine a future that included a second attempt at this camp. Our instincts were to run back into our nest. Undeterred, God simply nudged at another heart. Not at Rosie or at I, but at Gabby, a longtime Baby Grace camper who had attended that first alumni camp. Through her own personal story, Gabby helped us realize that we had not met those moms where they were, which was still in their nests of pain and trauma and negative labels that their lives to this point have ingrained into their heads and into their souls. Gabby was confident that once we showed them that we were willing to acknowledge them where they would be more willing to follow us and step out onto the branch outside their comfort zones. This year, with Gabby's encouragement, we embarked on a second alumni camp with a plan inspired by Gabby's story. And with encouragement from us, Gabby joined us on staff to serve as a bridge between us and the moms. We started the weekend in their nest by facing negative labels head on. We acknowledged them, we accepted them, and we let them go. Once we had coaxed them out onto the branch, we encouraged them to dream. We helped them discover what motivates them, what's important to them, and what experiences they want out of life. Not for their kids, not for their families, not for anyone else, but for them. Rosie took them through a dream mapping exercise where they had to acknowledge out loud what kind of dreams they had for themselves and how to break that dream into manageable steps. So what do they dream about? They dream about starting their own business, about running a half marathon, or about buying a house. They dream about having more meaningful relationships with their loved ones and with God, and about loving themselves more wholly and more unconditionally. Because you can't do this alone, we introduced the idea of an accountability partner, and we gave them permission and training for having tough conversations built on trust. We also spent time practicing positive affirmation and encouragement, which they had no trouble giving, but had a lot of trouble receiving. It turns out that when you live your entire life with a negative inner dialogue that it contains labels like fat, stupid, unworthy, and unlovable, believing anything positive is hard. That negative inner dialogue can cause you to tell stories to yourself about people and situations that simply aren't true, something we labeled head trash. When you have head trash, you are fighting an uphill battle for accountability and achieving your dreams. Surely some of you here today know what I'm talking about. At one point or another, I think we've all had moments where we, at the very least, doubt ourselves. We are our own worst enemies, aren't we? We doubt that we are going to meet the right person, get the job, get the promotion. We don't get an invitation to a party, and all of a sudden we convince ourselves that everybody must hate us. We write 8 versions of a sermon, and we're still not sure if it's good enough. Or maybe that's just me. Maybe Pastor Bill. I pray, though, that for all of you, these moments are situational, that they're temporary. But for many Baby Grace moms, these doubts become permanent labels. So what happened when we were able to help them see past those labels and past their uncertainty? Growth, literally right before our eyes. Growth isn't easy, and these ladies came with the intention to work hard and dig deep, and they worked so hard all weekend long through that pain. I had the honor and the joy of observing their growing pains, and the confidence and the hope was palpable. I could tell you hours of stories of that hope, but today I'm going to stick with one. Kristen is someone in whom we all see amazing qualities, but she has long struggled with an inner dialogue of self-pity and a lack of confidence. The lessons at Alumni Camp hit especially hard for her as she sobbed through many of our devotionals and our exercises and through our entire Sunday morning worship service. The following day, she posted a new declaration for herself on Facebook, and I get to share it with you today. This weekend, I was blessed with the opportunity to attend a leadership and personal growth retreat. Words cannot even come close with the emotions, support, love, and excitement, and many more feelings I was filled with. In my short 27 years of life, I have had a lot thrown at me, and I handle it by tucking it in so deep and covering it up with makeup and pretty clothes and smiles and laughter. People are always telling me how much of a great leader I am, and it's so hard for me to see myself. But this weekend, I agreed to chase a dream of mine. From this day, I'm on a mission, and no one can stop me. I'm going to the top, and the most amazing part is I'm not even doing it alone. I love that part because she knows that we believe in her, and she knows that we're there for her, and that's so important when you can't believe in yourself. As the director of the Baby Grace Ministry, I have spent this last year back and forth between the nest and the branch, between being the nudger and being the nudgee. To say the least, it has been a year of growing pains. Growth often does mean pain, but it is through suffering that God often reveals himself to us. If we could ask the prophets, they would tell us that suffering is part of the call to serve Jesus. It's a tough reality, but when realized, the growth and the pain that goes with us can and will transform us. Yesterday marked the 13th birthday of Baby Grace. This congregation has been instrumental in the transformation this ministry has created in the lives of all of those impacted by this ministry, including me personally. Sometimes I stop to think about that moment 13 years ago, when I was cozy and safe in my nest, and God coaxed me out onto the branch with a call to show his grace to his children in need. What if I had said no? How about you? Is there anybody here who's coaxing out of your nest today? If so, I encourage you, don't be afraid to spread your wings.